Welcome to LegalBlock Activity 5. This time with OpenLaw, we're going to talk about legal agreement platforms. We have today Kirsten and Michael from OpenLaw team. And we're going to discuss this platform for legal agreements, smart legal contracts, as people say. Kirsten and Michael, you can introduce yourself. You can give later a brief overview of OpenLaw, because for those of you watching this recording, we had preparation time before when we read about the platform. So this time we're going to get your questions, and we have here Kirsten and Michael to answer the questions. So you can introduce yourself. What's your role in OpenLaw? Michael?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. So, hi everyone, I'm Michael Rice. I am an attorney in California, and I'm also a longtime software engineer. So the official title is legal engineer, kind of a new field, right? We're doing a lot internally to try to develop it, in addition to building the OpenLaw platform. So I'm looking forward to talking with you guys.
Great, welcome. Kristen?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Kirsten Albers-Fiedler, and I'm also an attorney and a legal engineer at OpenLaw. So what I was going to do is I'm just going to go through a few slides and go over a brief overview of the OpenLaw platform, and then we're going to jump into the Q&A part of the session.
Great. Okay, so Kirsten, give us an overview of that. You can share the screen if you want.
Okay, I'm just going to share right now. Okay, are you all able to see the screen with the slides?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So, so basically at OpenLaw, what we're doing is we're building a legal agreement layer on the blockchain. So using OpenLaw, parties can rely on blockchain technology to automate the creation and management of legal agreements and seamlessly transfer blockchain-based or tokenized assets using our protocol. So blockchains themselves are extremely useful for managing assets. The data structure creates an immutable record of who owns what and at what time. So non-fungible tokens issued through smart contracts can represent unique assets, and they can represent real estate, IP rights, stock, evidence of ownership, and so on. So smart contracts can really turn these assets into the equivalence of emails, really offering the potential of entirely new business models to emerge. Using smart contracts, assets are able to be transferred really in a more efficient and more cost-effective and a more expeditious manner. So there are some limitations with smart contracts. There is a privacy concern. They're self-executing, which can create commercial risk, and some applications are difficult to manage. And there are some contractual provisions that, if they're not objectifiably verifiable, it's difficult to actually put that into code. So those issues are what we're fixing with our platform. So we're developing tools that usher in peer-to-peer contracting, solving a lot of the issues that I just mentioned. So the OpenLaw protocol allows legal agreements to be edited using our domain-specific markup language, which turns legal agreements into computable objects. Once those agreements are signed, they trigger smart contracts in a secure and private execution environment, and parties are able to halt and stop those smart contracts, which is very, very important when you're talking about automating processes. Evidence of state of those agreements and electronic signatures are cryptographically hashed on the Ethereum blockchain. And really, the goal is, what we're trying to do is to integrate outside oracles, and we just put out our API last week. So what we're also doing is we're creating kind of a network-driven approach. We're building a repository of legal agreements and deals that we want to encourage the legal community to come together to standardize those agreements. And we're currently collaborating with financial firms, law firms, and others to create those agreements using the OpenLaw protocol. And the platform itself is initially going to be free of cost to all users, and we want to encourage community collaboration to build the platform out. So through our protocol, we really want to increase efficiencies. We want to drive down costs and increase access to law. So we, with our contract management functionalities, we have the ability to create private instances for specific documents, businesses, or individuals. We can easily ingest like any documents or kind of a large number of documents, and parties are able to keep track of the agreements and signatures that are executed on our platform. And then we have also the API that allows for system integration with our protocol. So that was just a brief overview of the platform, and we can briefly get in. I can stop sharing my screen so we can get into the questions. I hope that was helpful.
Great, Kirsten. If anyone is not clear with something, put it in the chat, just in case. For example, the private instance, if someone has a question about that, just put it in the chat. Okay, we're going straight into the questions because we have a lot of questions. What we do is we try to group the questions. Let's keep the path with the company overview. Kristen, we have here 2 questions about basically, yes, a core company overview. What is how does the OpenLaw approach to smart contracts compare to Monex? That's one. And the other one is basically, what is the difference? What is the advantage of OpenLaw over the other offers that we have on the market, if we can say in the market right now?
Yeah, so I'll take that first question about Monex and some of the other players in the space. We, you know, I think having lots of companies try to address this and get involved in this area is good for everything. So, or for the entire industry. So I'm happy they're there. I think the simplest answer for comparing the two without going through like a kind of a features and benefits list of everything that we do versus what they do is I think my feeling anyway is that they're focused kind of on the broader process automation issue. So I think, you know, thinking through like as you work through a contract, all the different integration points you might have to see that that contract goes through its life cycle for like say a big company that might have a lot of touch points. I think that kind of again at a high level, I think one of the biggest differences that we're is in terms of what our focus is on. And if you've seen some of Aaron Wright's recent tweets on Twitter, he kind of lays this out in the idea of legal primitives, and that being that I think rather than focus on a very broad topic of automation, while we are focused on automation, we're focused on automation at the very fundamental level, the kind of things that really matter to getting agreements signed, having them be trustworthy, having them be provable in a court. That's kind of real fine grained but less splashy, I guess, features than you might see from some of the other competitors. But again, I think we're really focused on getting the little details right, getting those things mastered, and then putting them on the blockchain and really embracing the blockchain. I think I answered both questions at once. Yeah.
Yeah, and that brings us to the next topic, if you will. There are some questions about the markup language and recording contracts, because usually lawyers, you know, like they used to listen about recording contracts, and then when we started sharing the material, That was the first question. I don't see recording contract here. I see here a markup. Markup language is not like the word, you know, in Office, things like that. So I'm gonna just read the questions on that topic here. Okay, here's one. For what I understand, there is currently a gap between the ability of a recording contract to capture the terms of a fairly complex contract and what can be executed by a smart contract. In other words, it's difficult for the smart contract to handle a tree of nesting conditionals. I'm sorry, I'm not a software developer, so I couldn't tell the capabilities of the markup language. Can someone clue me in? This is one. And the other one about markup language is, I'm reading both of them so we can go into the whole topic. In my limited knowledge on how legal smart contracts work, I understand that by using recorded contracts, the agreement is a legally binding contract, therefore enforceable in courts. Basically, a legal binding agreement on the blockchain. The markup language step is just used to specify code for formatting within a text file. How enforceable is a legal agreement based in markup language?
So yeah, Kirsten, I was gonna say we kind of divided these questions up beforehand, and you actually put the two questions together that we kind of divvied up both of those. So Kirsten, I guess that
it's okay. You elaborate as you want. I'm just putting the docs, and I put these two, the two together, so you can elaborate.
Yeah, but so I think since we went, you know, the two questions got put together, I think Kirsten, you ended up on the last one. Do you want to take the last one first, and then we'll go back to the first one?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So just on the last question about the markup agreement. So OpenLaw protocol, like the markup language, allows parties to really transform a natural language agreement into machine readable objects that have relevant variables and logic defined within those agreements. The markup is what makes it possible for the parties to create and manage the entire transaction on a blockchain. So really our markup language isn't changing any of the legal provisions in the agreement. It really just automates that agreement and allows parties to really interact with or allows the agreements to interact with smart contracts and the blockchain itself.
Yeah, and I think on the Ricardian question, the way I understood it when I read it, and I did read it pretty closely. So I think the answer I have is when, let me see if I can paraphrase the question again. The question was if both the terms on both say like a software smart contract and a legal contract can both be fairly complex, right? It could be complex for, or when we think about the complexity, we think about who's trying to interpret it. So I think normal humans trying to interpret a complex legal agreement would actually struggle quite a bit to interpret it without legal training and without backgrounds, right? Or without that background. And vice versa for a smart contract that's written in code. And in smart contract code, if you've ever looked at like the Solidity programming language, is actually pretty complicated as well. So even for a computer interpreter, right? So as you're building both those things, complexity is there both ways. And so I think, you know, the gist of the question was there's complexity in terms of like the branching logic in the smart contract and in terms of the logic within the legal prose itself. And so I guess we see it at this point as really you kind of need both to make this work, right? So the smart contract, the Solidity code that might be integrated with the OpenLaw markup language has its own complexity. And then the language itself on the OpenLaw platform that we've written, I think would need to be taken together in terms of what's enforceable if there were ever a dispute. So I think it's going to be a tough challenge for people who are, you know, later trying to resolve a dispute between the parties in terms of having to read both the technical language and the legal prose. So I'll pause there and see if
It's going to be a challenge at whatever you do here. Okay. I'm going to ask the question and put as well on the chat. It's not a new question. It's just the same question. So everybody's on the same page with the questions. Okay. Yes. Let's move to the more technical questions. From basic to more technical. Who upload the template? If I'm a lawyer, do I need a developer or a coder to upload the template for me?
Kirsten, I think that one was yours.
Okay.
Do we lose Kirsten?
No, I don't see Kirsten here.
I think,
in any case,
she might have dropped off.
Yeah, I think we lost her. All right, so I can take it though.
Oh.
So yeah, I mean, the short answer is, oh yeah, she just told me her computer froze. All this technology, right? It's so amazing, but then when it breaks, it's just everything breaks with it. So the short answer is, yeah, anybody can upload the template. You can use, you could start freehand using the OpenLaw platform and just start writing the markup language, or you can upload a Word document. So anybody can do it. Our theory, one of our kind of general ideas with OpenLaw is that, I'm coming back to part of the question is, if I'm a lawyer, do I need a developer or coder? So the idea is, if you were to try to walk up and start using the blockchain and start writing smart contracts today, it'd be a pretty big challenge, right? I mean, you basically have to understand software development. I mean, you have to start with programming, but you also have to understand kind of broader software engineering principles in terms of how to write code, how to get it deployed, how to harden it, how to make sure it's safe. And so our theory with OpenLaw is by having this markup language and these kind of like templates that are out there, is it should get you started pretty quickly. So even folks who are not super technical can start to walk up and use the technology, start engaging with the blockchain using our templates. And it should be a fairly smooth transition from being just strictly a lawyer who basically works in Microsoft Word most of the time to actually getting an agreement that's running on the blockchain.
Good. Keeping the pace with the technical question, there's here, obviously, the gas question. Every time I do a revision to the draft, this is for people who watched actually the demos already, because that's part of the demos you can see there interacting with the draft. Every time I do a revision to the draft and send it back to the other party, is transaction sent to the blockchain. Therefore, there is gas to pay. Is there a way to make only one party accountable for the gas expenses?
Well, it's an interesting question. As of right now, actually the OpenLaw platform does pay the gas for it. So when you do the way it's built today is when you sign and send an agreement or you do the execution, that's gas cost that we're absorbing. There is a revision coming out very soon where the parties themselves can start to interact if you're using MetaMask or any of those kind of tools, or Trust Wallet or those types of tools, where the parties themselves can pay the gas for it with some other benefits, of course. But yeah, as of right now, I don't know technologically how you would shift the gas cost to one party or the other, honestly. But
that's exactly the question, because it's a technical question, because when we were in the chat on a Slack, someone asked, well, maybe you can put that later on the model, and the other one said, well, I know, but it's not about the model, it's about the technical part. I mean, how do you say you pay this gas? I mean, if I have to send a transaction because I'm, revising the contract, the agreement, and I have to send it back to you with my comments, there's a transaction there. I'm sending the transaction. I cannot, who pays there? There's a project I know working with real estate, that they solve that with a subscription, something like that model. Mm-hmm. So they pay the gas for the transactions. So again, that's part of a model that...
well, you can see, I mean, you can't technologically, you can shift the gas costs, you know, around in the network. You know, for example, how OpenLaw pays the gas cost today, right? So when you do the signing and sending, that we fund that through a server-based solution. So I suppose there are technical solutions to it, depending on how you want to do it and how complex the gas costs get, or I mean, how expensive they get based on the complexity of the interactions. But there's, but as of right now, I don't think that there's a simple answer to it.
Okay, check the chat. No gas, no gain, says. Yeah, let's say if you're going to work right now with an agreement soon, every transaction you send MetaMask, correct? We are using MetaMask to send the transactions, right?
Well, no, not as of right this minute, no. We have our own signature process that happens on our platform, but that is a revision that's coming out, is the MetaMask integration. We were just looking at it. In fact, Kirsten and I were just looking at it like not even 30 minutes ago. So it's coming.
Okay, great. Great to know. Now we're gonna go, if you can, MJ, unmute Dimitri. Dimitri has a question and follows as well on there's a tech questions because it's about integration.
Hello. Yes, my question is quite simple. You know, imagine that a dispute arises on execution of the contract. So may it be somehow facilitated to have inside in a contract a built-in link to an online alternative dispute resolution platform. So like one counterparty push the button and the whole dispute goes to this platform, blockchain-based platform. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for the question. Kirsten and I had talked about this before. It's interesting that you would ask that question today, Dimitri, because we have, I can't tell you too much right now, but I'll tell you we have a demo coming out soon, and the way you described it might be something you get to see next week.
I feel it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're predicting the future. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, Dimitri always has good questions about that. MJ, do you have any question on the chat related to this topic so we can get that to follow the line here before we go with the legal questions?
You're asking me to sort through and stay on topic here. Not sure. There was one. Yeah, I guess the one sort of related was about how much data is used up. No, I lost it here. I gotta.
Okay, so let's move with the other ones because we have still more. We have one here about enforceability, basically. In case one counterparty refuses to recognize the existence or the fact of signing of a contract, what evidence could be produced for proof of existence?
Yeah, this one's mine too. Sorry, Kirsten. I'll get you a chance soon.
It's okay.
Yeah, we looked at this question. So it is funny. Again, it's funny the question came up this morning just now because we had one of our technical co-founder was on a call with us this morning, and we actually asked. I asked him some of these questions that are raised or issues that are raised by this question. We discussed. As of right now, the way the platform works is it does store evidence of the signature and basically a hash of the agreement. So you know from what's on the blockchain that who's signed, who's agreed to the contract, and what the terms of it are basically cryptographically stored on the blockchain. So there's a lot of evidence of enforceability there. So if another party were to dispute it, you know, you'd go look at that evidence. And I wish I had an example that I could show you right now, but I don't. That said, that's kind of an early primitive version of what we've got, or what we're going. We are in the process of kind of thinking through and putting together tools that help prove that, right? That would help build that kind of paper trail that would be super valuable in the case of a dispute, or if you ever had to go to a court or had to prove that the contract existed, you know, basically prove that there's a binding contract. And without having, you know, those kind of detailed audit logs or paper trail, it would end up becoming a battle, at least in the States. I'm not sure how it works in other legal systems, but you would end up having this battle of computer science experts trying to argue about what actually got stored, what didn't get stored, and that'd be a fairly expensive dispute to have, right? And so what we're trying to do is make that very simple. And the idea, basically being consistent with, you know, the cryptographic systems that we're building today, is that it's very expensive to fake it, but very cheap to prove it. And the idea being that if we have the tools that can have that audit trail and can give you that easy proof, that we should limit the number of disputes and basically make the whole commercial system much more, less expensive to defend, right? It's just by having that proof that's there, that's easy to validate, it'd be very, very hard to dispute it.
And it's important to this remark here that, as Michael says, we're talking about primitives. I mean, we're talking here in this video, and maybe in 2 months we have a different name, a different function, a different something. Because this, you know, this feedback with questions and answers, that what makes possible the improvement of any platform. Again, this kind of activities is a collaboration of basically knowledge. We have questions, you have answers. Not all the answers has to be, you know, the perfect answer or the right answer for the time. Sometimes it's maybe, we don't know, which is normal. We're talking about primitives here. Jorn, have a question here. How much data is put on the blockchain per average contract instance? What is the written in clear text, and for what parts do you just create a hash? This is a question on the chat right now.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Basically, how much data is put on the blockchain per average contract instance?
Yeah, Kirsten, let me know if you want me to jump in here. But the quick answer is the contract itself, we don't store on the blockchain, just because, you know, the more data you try to put on the blockchain, A, it's more expensive, coming back to the gas cost. B, it's not a very efficient use of blockchain, right? I mean, we really don't want to be storing tons of data out there, right? So what actually gets stored on the chain at this point is, like I said, basically evidence of the assent between the parties. So the signatures, and then a hash of the agreement as it was filled out. So that, you know, the template has fields that you can put in data. When that all gets collapsed and sent, that hash gets stored. So you have proof of not only the template markup, but the actual data that was in the agreement.
Good. Okay. There's a question here about identity. Can I establish my identity in a legal binding contract, no matter if it's smart or not, if written in software or paper, using a self-governed digital identity schema? How is that better than providing control over a private public key pair, like my Bitcoin wallet, for example? It's interesting because when we start to get in these legal agreement platforms in general, not just OpenLaw, but legal agreement platforms, the first question was always, it was a month ago, the first question was about identity. And people, lawyers and non-lawyers, you know, in our channels were kind of skeptical about this legal agreement platform. Yes, but you don't have identity. Yes, but you cannot start, you know, working on it if you don't have proof of identity. And we always get back to the identity thing. which is an issue. Everybody's working on that. But basically, that's the question about identity.
So right now, what we're doing is we're using parties' email addresses as their identity to sign agreements on our platform. I think Michael, he did talk a little bit about how we're kind of integrating the MetaMask integration into our protocol. I don't know, Michael, is there any other thing that you wanted to add on that point?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think I think this is what's so interesting about OpenLaw is that this is a small issue, right? I mean, a small, like in terms of technology, it's not a very splashy issue, solving identity. But for lawyers and people who really care about getting transactions right, it's critically important. So, so we are thinking a lot about it. Again, that was a big part of our call this morning is how do we make sure that the identities of the parties are what they say they are? Right now, the platform it's fairly simplistic in that we use email. You log in through OpenLaw and then we store that information, and that's what ends up on the blockchain. In the future, we're moving to a MetaMask based approach, or basically EIP 712, right, approach. And then going beyond that to the sovereign identity ideas, we are definitely looking at that, and it's super interesting because we can do some really amazing things with that, right? We could do, by fully embracing it, you could solve some of the issues you have today where, let's say you needed somebody to prove a KYC issue or an AML issue, right? You needed somebody to say, I have already validated that I am, that I've satisfied AML requirements or know your customer issues. That could be part of your sovereign identity, and you could reveal that through the OpenLaw platform. And that way you get kind of the benefit of not having to have an oracle that you would go out to get that information separately, which is be built right into the contract and make things, make the transaction cost even lower and faster. So it's definitely an interesting problem, and we're definitely deeply engaged in it.
Good. Yeah, and we had a session last month with Uport, with Andres, and we talk about that. Again, it's very important for us. And the natural integration we can see on this is something like Uport, since it's actually the same company back in both projects, which make, like this possible. But again, that integration is always, an issue to understand and to talk about. Here's a question from Juan on identity. Do you plan to integrate identity standards like ERC 725 or 735 in order to transfer proper? You need to identify the contracting party as well as the asset.
So I can just jump in on this question. I don't know if you all have seen, but we did do an end-to-end real estate proof of concept, and that was done with a law firm in Australia. But basically, what we did is we modeled an ERC 721 standard to actually do that. And I think that there are a lot of different standards that are coming up. That will definitely be useful as we move forward and grow in the future.
Yeah, there was another question about the standards, as you mentioned. Yeah, exactly. I watched the real estate, and obviously for real estate, you use 721. Is the here we're talking about what Juan is talking about, the standard for identity, which I think is out of the legal contract, and when we go to the legal contract, we're talking about 721 standard. Is that correct?
Yeah, so basically I think that with the identity piece in our platform, we're kind of developing that piece of it. So we're starting with email, and we're kind of attaching the MetaMask into that, and as we develop, I think that's kind of like a separate part of the platform. It's like the identity of the individuals, and then you have the actual like asset piece as well.
Okay. all the legal agreements, I mean, the 721, this is a question about the standards as well. If you're not familiar with this, it's non-fungible tokens, which is a unique, distinctive property of the asset, the standard. You're using, and this, that's demo about real estate. You use the standard 721 because it was a tokenized, because it was a real estate transaction, right? Not, because that's another doubt we have on the chat. If you're using 721, the standard 721 for everything.
Oh no, so I mean there are definitely different standards for different things. I mean we're also working on a license agreement, and there's a standard called, it's an ERC 888, and we kind of modeled that after that, so it allows parties to have kind of separate ownership rights in a specific asset, which you can't do with a 721. So there are different standards that we're taking advantage of as well.
Good, good. Okay, if you have any other question, that chat is open, or you can raise your hand.
Someone sent me, I think, a question. So the question says, how can lawyers who don't code be sure that the markup language doesn't add variables to a transaction, such as some kind of bias, for example? So I think there was another question that was sent in as well about kind of if a lawyer doesn't code, like, are they able to use our platform? And I can just off the bat just share that we're not anyone, we're having the platform open to anyone. I mean, you don't need to have like a coding background to use OpenLaw.io. So just on that question, we're developing tools that can automate variables. So it allows for a greater ability for us to ingest the agreements, but the tools themselves allow the parties to kind of to look at what those variables are, and it will show a really nice user interface that allows the party to see what specific variables are put into the agreement. Leary115, if you're on the call, I mean, was there any type of bias specifically that you were thinking of? I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, I think that you need to be careful with the chat. The chat is to everyone. Otherwise, you are sending maybe a private chat to a person, like in this case. So the only person who can see the question is Kirsten at this point.
I guess what I could add to that as well is that.
Can you guys hear me at all, though? I'm just.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much.
Okay, no, I didn't have any. Specific example in mind, except just in the concept generally of, developers sometimes inadvertently slanting code in a direction just because of a, personal bias or their style of coding or something. And while that may not make any difference, in some cases where it ends up directing a process of a contract, it could make a difference, it seems to me. So, I mean, how would a lawyer be sure that the markup language itself isn't sort of behaving in ways that neither of the parties really expected?
Yeah, so I guess basically what I guess how I could describe it is, I mean, there are specific provisions like parties' names or just their addresses and how much a person is making for a salary that are pretty standardized, but maybe are you getting to kind of provisions that would be maybe automated through a smart contract that maybe an attorney wouldn't exactly know everything about? Is that kind of where you're
it's not the legal terms that we would know how to look at as a lawyer. I'm saying sort of like the more hidden aspects of it that are more buried in the code behind the contract that might have some impact on how the contract works. I mean, I just wanted to know if that's an issue you're looking at and how a lawyer would feel comfortable about it.
Well, I think in terms of what is kind of hard coded, and if an attorney looks at it and isn't 100% positive of what actually is being calculated, I mean, just for in a tax demo that we did, we hard coded the 2018 federal wage withholdings in that. So unless an attorney would go into the source, you wouldn't know exactly what that is, but we have that open. So I mean, if there's an agreement, a party can click on the source, and all of that code it's in Scala code, so it's fairly easily understandable just to kind of read through and what the calculations are. So we try to be as transparent as possible with showing parties what is being calculated and what is being sent to a smart contract, whatever specific provisions those are.
If I can layer on that too, I think the question is kind of twofold. There's the markup, there's the technology powering the markup language itself, right? And then there's an implementation of the markup language. So if you write an agreement, you are basically putting pieces and parts of that markup language into your agreement. I think that, I think the risk of bias is always there, right? I mean, that's obviously like an important thing. But I will say the markup language itself is fairly innocuous in most places. So it has, I shouldn't describe it as innocuous, but I think the risk is fairly low, at least in most of the markup pieces where, it says, I want to bold the text here, underline here, I want a signature block here, maybe a conditional, like I want to show this piece and this piece under these circumstances. So a lot of it's pretty simplistic logic. So I think the risk of bias, at least from the technology that built the markup language, is fairly low, but to your point, it's something you always got to watch for. So definitely take that question home. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, thanks. No, thank you.
No, thank you for your question. And I think you did ask earlier, I apologize. I think I cut out my Zoom crash, but just about universities. Would you mind repeating that? I think it deleted from my chat, actually.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's just my own, because you had just mentioned in your opening comments that you're working with law firms and other parties to get feedback and whatnot. And I just wondered, because I deal a little bit with law schools, I'm just wondering if you have coordinated at all or considered coordinating with law schools to start instructing law students about this as part of a curriculum. Because I'm actually talking to a law school about all this, and I was just wondering if you guys have considered that from your end.
No, I think that's a wonderful idea. I can also add that our co-founder and CEO, Aaron Wright, is an associate clinical professor at Cardozo Law School, and he teaches blockchain and law at that university. And I took a class also at Duke University Law School, and they are also teaching blockchain and law. So it's really nice to see universities kind of develop their curriculum in the technology space, and particularly in blockchain technology. So there are a few that are out there already, but I'm happy to see more.
Good. Okay, here's a question about the chat about as you see on the use of the platform so far, what templates have more demand right now? Like shareholder agreements, founders agreement, convertible notes. That's I think is Vicente's question here.
I have a thought on an answer to this. We just recently added a new activity stream to the platform. So it's actually an answer you could solve on your own. And I'm only mentioning that because it's a good plug for the new feature. So you can actually see who's using what contract, what edits are there, kind of in a very, the whole idea of being to like spur the community to collaborate on these agreements, at least on the public instance, not on a private instance, but see what's being worked on, where the activity is. So we should take a look and get back to you.
Great, and let's talk a little bit about community collaboration because you opened with that, Michael. We're holding this activity with OpenLaw. It's a whole thing. It's not just a Q&A session. We're going to work in a draft with the LegalBlock lawyers to get a template. That template, we're going to use OpenLaw to upload the template. I think something easy is a consulting agreement, and it's useful for everyone. But these are the things that we have to work together, because if they don't have our feedback, remember that LegalBlock have lawyers from everywhere, literally everywhere. It's not a US-based community. So it's going to be very interesting for you to have our feedback on that. And obviously, if we need to learn about where you are working with. And it's interesting, the sentence question about what is the template have more demand? I think it depends, right? I see real estate like a basic leasing agreement, easy to implement there, correct?
The answer is yes. Yep. Yeah. We tried to make this easy to use. I think we can do almost anything. It's an interesting question, right? I mean, the different legal systems have different norms and different, obviously, requirements. So it would be interesting to think about what would be the most appropriate, or I guess an agreement that would have the most commonality among all the different legal regimes and systems. So I guess one that pops in my mind, the consulting agreement sounds pretty innocuous, to use that word again. The other one might be like, the one my kind of go-to is a bill of sale. So the idea that like I sell you something and you pay me something, that's going to be pretty consistent, I think, across regimes. So I don't know. I'm curious to know what your all thoughts are.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I think that, some jurisdictions aren't as kind of open to adopting different or emerging technologies, but yeah, definitely.
The question here, talking about that, and based on what we talk about the LegalBlock community, as from as worldwide, do you have plans to explore templates in other languages, like any other language? I mean, Spanish, Italian, Russian, and how we can collaborate with that? This is Alvis' question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of gets down a little bit to kind of what countries' laws are really open to permitting. Kind of e-signatures are kind of one thing that some countries aren't. Some countries don't really allow that to be a legally binding contract. In the United States, obviously, there's the e-Sign Act and UETA that really allows us to really operate kind of under the law. But yeah, definitely. I don't know, Michael, do you have any extra thoughts on there?
Yeah, well, so it's interesting. OpenLaw, we have the development team, the team that works for OpenLaw, we're distributed all over the world. And so I'm pretty sure I haven't seen any agreements in other language, but I've definitely seen implementations of it running with different languages. So I think supporting the global community is absolutely part of our vision. So I think right now, even if you were to upload an agreement in a different language, the software these days can handle that pretty well.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to say here, like we have Italian.
Yeah. Give it a shot. Give it a try. Let's see what yeah. I'm sorry, Albie, I cut you off.
No, sorry. No. I think there was a problem with the connection with Tete. Can you repeat it? Did you say? Sorry, when you were talking, the connection was, with a little problem, but it's okay now.
Is it better now? Okay. Well, we're still trying to work on the internet here in California. I'm still trying to work that out. I think I was saying that the platform itself should be like what they call I-18N and internationalized, right? So should be able to try it out. I would say, again, I would use it as a plug to say, get engaged with the platform and give it a try, right? And let us know how it goes.
Absolutely, and we're going to do it.
Good.
And we hope that everyone take the possibility to jump and to work and to make the contribution with your amazing work.
Good.
Thank you so much.
You know, I would mention too. Yeah, no, it was great. So, and I would mention, since we only have a few minutes left, that yeah, please do get engaged in it. We have a community Slack that you can log in, and as you're working through it, I watch that pretty much all day long. And if there are questions or issues or you have better ideas or there are things you like, just let us know and we'll talk to you. I mean, Kirsten and I are there, as well as some of our other kind of community based.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And you're welcome to pass by a Slack. We have a dedicated channel to talk about legal agreement platforms and LegalBlock Slack as well. And it's interesting. I mean, because, like you have exec calls, you have people that think that a model will solve all the code things, and no, you have to build it. Questions about identity is interesting. We're close to close. And I have here a last question. MJ, you're gonna...
Yeah, this one's from
read that. We're gonna read that, and then we close. Okay.
Sure. Jeremy was asking about basically. Well, let me read it first. I'm wondering about bespoke smart contracts. If the available templates do not do what we want, how do we go about coding a new smart contract? Should we go and find our own programmer, or is this something that OpenLaw would do? So, talk about how lawyers will be able to propose new templates or create their own. Will they, I'll just throw this in, will they always be owned and controlled by OpenLaw, or are they more like open source and community?
Well, I'll give you a very technical answer. The markup language itself can interact with any contract at any address. So definitely not controlled by us. So you can build your own smart contracts, deploy them, and interact with them with the OpenLaw platform. On the roadmap, I believe, is the idea that you could plug and play different contracts. So like if you had like a basic bill of sale example, you could drop that into your agreement and interact with it. But if you wanted to go do something very complex, it would be something you could build on your own. And I don't think we have a model really where you could engage us to build it, but I don't think you would necessarily need to anyway, right? Because you could go and pull an open source contract down, deploy it on the blockchain, and then use it as a backing contract for your markup template. If that makes sense.
Okay, Jeremy, your answer there. Okay, so we're just closing now. We had a lot of questions for this session, and it was great. It is a great collaboration. We're gonna take, Albers offers to collaborate with templates in other languages. We're gonna keep going with this activity of drafting the template with you. And thank you very much for your time, Kirsten and Michael. Thank you, everyone. If you're gonna stay for the after hours, we usually close and stay for an informal after hours. You can do it. But so far, we have to go. Thank you very much, everyone.
No, thank you all for having us, and thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.